Hello folks, this is Vlad aka Whiskey-Foxtrot with another Radeon RX Vega 64 performance review on Radeon Software Crimson version 17.9.2. I will be taking a look at some previously run benchmarks, but on Crossfire. As I mentioned, AMD officially launched Radeon Software Crimson release 17.9.2 on September 21st, which fixes some important bugs and also reintroduces Crossfire and multi-GPU support to satisfy the needs of the power-hungry enthusiasts. While Crossfire support, from a game developer's point of view, seems to be waning, it is still a viable option in many games. So of course I had to try it out. I reran some of the benchmarks I used in the last videos to get an idea of the performance difference. Starting with Rise of the Tomb Raider, this is where I probably saw the best bump in performance. At the very high settings, the average frames increased to 80 frames per second. While during gameplay, I haven't seen these frames drop below 80 frames except in cutscenes. Next I tried Tom Clancy's The Division, which had some rather disappointing results. While the performance was up in the mid to high 60 frames per second in DirectX 12, Crossfire in DirectX 11 stayed around the same frame rate, but at the cost of a 1.2 kilowatt of power draw at the wall. That's for my whole system, by the way. To put it into perspective, the DirectX 12 measured an average of 680 watts, while Crossfire mode bumped it up to an average of 840 watts, with the occasional spike of 1.2 kilowatts. You can get better performance with one card by slightly bumping down on the eye candy. Just by bumping down to the high setting in game, gave a good 15 to 20 frames increase, and it looks just as fine. Crossfire in Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Wildlands was also a bit of a disappointment. With no real performance boost recorded, we're talking an average of 6 frames difference for a total average of 55 frames at ultra settings. Yes, as you may have noticed, I start all games out at the highest setting. I love increased visuals, especially in the games I've mentioned so far. And Ubisoft did an amazing job with Ghost Recon Wildlands, and I actually want to enjoy it as it was meant to be. Staying above the minimal 40 frames per second limit I've set for single player games is just fine. But of course, I have to try to push that limit even higher. With Crossfire it can be done, but I'm not willing to keep the hyper power draw at the wall, so further tuning is in order. Getting rid of the God rays and dropping anisotropic filters and distant shadows gave me another bump in the mid 60s without sacrificing visual details. This also dropped an average of 40 to 60 frames watts at the wall. Keep in mind again, I'm going for the best visual performance before looking at the power draw. At this point, I can look into undervolting to bring the system with Crossfire mode into the low 700 watt range, while still playing at close to max settings. And the biggest disappointment of them all was EA's Star Wars Battlefront. While this game showed a decent performance boost of about 20 to 30 frames per second, Crossfire mode creates some surface rendering issues, as you can see here, especially in snow maps like on Hoth. To me, that's a game breaker, especially considering that on a single card I can get decent performance with an average of 80 frames per second on ultra mode. Crossfire in this case really isn't worth it, as RX Vega 64 can handle the game just fine at ultra settings. And for good measure, how about some synthetic benchmarks? I'll be using the popular 3D Mark, Firestrike Extreme, and TimeSpy 1.1. Running the RX Vega 64s in Crossfire mode on TimeSpy gave an overall graphics score of 14,303 points. Firestrike Extreme, the multi-GPU portion of the benchmarks, gave a graphics score of 21,469 points. These synthetic benchmarks really don't mean much to me. I just include them as some folks like to cross-reference them. I'll include links to the results in the description below. Crossfire support is not available or functional in all games, and some only showed minimal performance gains or even decreased performance. One such example was the popular PlayerUnknown's Battleground, or PUBG as it's more affectionately known by some. Whether Crossfire is supported or not, other concerns are worth your consideration, namely power draw. The average high on my system with Crossfire disabled was in the high 500 to low 600 watts. Adding Crossfire to the mix gave some very drastic numbers. All the benchmarks in games mentioned above running at Ultra or the game's max settings had high readings of 1.2 to 1.4 kilowatts. That's 1200 to 1400 watts at the wall. This is definitely not something I would recommend running on the average X370 AM4 motherboard or lower quality power supply, for obvious reasons. Thanks again for watching. If there is anything specific you would like to see tested, please let me know in the comments below. If you like the video, hit that like button and subscribe to get notified of new releases put up by yours truly. Thanks again and have a wonderful week.